team?
Cody Bailey from Andromeda, 30-year programmer in probably 20 different languages. I've seen it all.
Alex, I'm validator at Secret Saturn, and I'm DevRel at the Secret Network Foundation.
So as an opening question, who are the builders in Cosmos, and why are they here versus somewhere else?
So the question, when I always think about builders, we also have to think about user personas, right? They're all type of builders. There's app developers, there are app chain developers, where people go down to the consensus levels. So, but I think the main selling point for Cosmos is the sovereignty and interoperability, right? And scalability as well. So, but sovereignty, app chains, I think is one of the main drivers.
And just to jump in there right away, what type of person do you think that attracts? Like the Cosmos developers and their personality types. Like how do you think they compare to other ecosystems? Can you detect the similarities and the differences?
Well, most of the smart contracts we're developing here are in Rust/Cosmos. And Rust is a sort of the third large generation of C and C++ derivative languages. So it's a lot easier for someone who's come from a master's degree in computer science to like slide over here and be able to use a real language, unlike Solidity, which is a domain-specific language that looks a lot like a flimsy version of JavaScript with a whole lot of problems. So moving into this area, you can begin creating, and if you look at like, what is it, on Reddit they do the developer poll every year, and Rust is like always at the top of like the most loved language, because it fixes so many of the problems of like C++ and C and all the other derivatives. And so I think giving people the opportunity to go out and start creating value in like, not even arguably the most dynamic pieces of software being written in the world today with some of the smartest people in the entire space, like they've got a way to move in pretty quickly and start creating, within days.
Yeah, I can only agree to this. What I would possibly add is basically just as someone who's has way less experience than you. Solidity is just basically meant as an easy entry, so has way less friction at the start, but it gets way more complicated as you start to get more into it. Has the common pitfalls. Whereas Cosmos and like just Rust basically does the exact opposite, so the learning curve is pretty steep for a beginner. But as you basically go into it, it just it's actually just better at that point, I would say.
But to comment on that, you also get much better engineers because you don't have a lot of entry-level people coming in with React experience wanting to build smart contracts, or trying to move in. So if like in our organization, I always try to hire the smartest people I can find, and then I'll figure out where to put them later on. Like just hire the best engineers you can find; they will figure it out. And so finding these C and C++ type guys and say, here, I'm going to throw you into Rust. It takes them 2 months to like really get the hang of it, and it's boom, you got a great engineer there. Versus like, hey, I've got this really weird language that like no one knows how to use, and it's got, it's been around for like 8 years and really hasn't improved much.
Yeah, I think I would agree with what everybody else had to kind of say. Well, Cosmos, typically we have better swag, I think. I think if you were to like sample this room, I think like the IQ and the skill set in this room is probably much higher as a sample size than, let's say, in the Ethereum space, and I think that's and I think part of that is just the product of it is that our ecosystem is so early. Like you have a lot of builders here that are really want to build something independent, interconnected. They understand like the technology pretty well. And so it feels early, it feels right. And Ethereum had this back in the early days too, but it's just been flooded by everybody else at this point. And but what's so unique about the Cosmos space is like it's people who want to work on the frontier of tech, not build the 15th Solidity base stacks, you know what I mean?
So what I find interesting about this panel in Cosmos is ultimately the sum of all survivorship bias. It's all the developers that stuck with it. So why are we losing? Like why are we losing people and how can we do better? Or is it, or do you view this as just the natural cycle of life? Of like that is what makes Cosmos special, is that if you can't survive the process of being onboarded, whether it's execution layer, consensus, smart contracts, then like let's try. Like, is that part of the beauty, or is it something we need to improve on?
Yeah, some of us like doing it the hard way, and those are the ones that stick around probably. We've got big problems on the developer side. The documentation in our ecosystem is just really bad. So having new guys come into the system, asking for documentation, it's like, oh yeah, that's about 2 years old, things change. There's like a Discord, scroll up 500 pages and there's your answer. Like, that's where we're at sometimes. But the Ethereum thing we were just talking about, I wanted to comment on something. And we get this a lot, especially at events like ETH Denver, specifically named ETH Denver. I call it IBC Denver. And you talk to people, oh, you're in the Cosmos, like, yeah, you don't have any volume, there's no money over there, all the volume's over. It's like, yeah, you know what, in 1997, AOL had like a shitload of people, but they all moved out because they found better technology. And like, once you get, if you want to corner somebody from the ETH community, and you want to corner them and really put it to them, make them admit that our technology is better. They'll have to. It took them 4 or 5 years to do proof of stake transition. Like there's a second generation blockchain built 11 years ago, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, and so you have to take that into account here. That we're like in the first or second inning of a ball game. We've got a long way to go in this technology. There's a point where when it gets good enough, it'll stay. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we're a long way from finding that path.
Today was at one panel. I don't know if you guys know Electric Capital report. So it was quite interesting to see. Sometimes we think we're losing people, but this report goes across all the ecosystems. Ethereum, Solana, Polygon, everything, Cosmos. And the interesting thing about the charts they're showing is that like mid-2022, there's a big correlation with the token prices itself. So from mid-2022 to almost end of 2023, there's a big percentage drop, about like 40% of developers across all the ecosystems. So the question is, are they leaving Cosmos or are they coming back to Web 2, for example, right? Like I think, and another interesting fact is that almost 40-50% of those developers who left, they were less than 1 year into ecosystems. So that shows like some friction points, like documentation. They just probably came from Web 2 to Web 3 and say, let me explore this world, right? If you think, we're still very early stage. Like we have, there's an estimate about 28 million developers worldwide across all the industries, right? In crypto, on this report, is 22,000, like open source. If you think it's like like a tenth of 1%. And imagine what we created so far with a tenth of 1%. If we can capture like 1% eventually on this next cycle, imagine all the things that can happen. So we have to remove this friction points of, especially for the novel developers coming into Web3. I think that's quite important.
Yeah, one thing that kind of comes to mind, Cosmos and the way we're designed, it's both like a bug and a feature, and I'll say that in the sense that like it's a bit of a bug because we don't have like a central organization within all of Cosmos that's like coordinating all the different activity, right? And so because we don't have that centralized organization coordinating all the activity, a lot of things fall through the gaps, right? Whether it's onboarding, documentation. I mean, if you're a new developer coming in the space, you don't even know where to begin. And so that's the bug element of it. But the feature element to it is there's a lot of really good dev teams in the broader Cosmos. And they're all approaching the problem not from one perspective, but from their own unique perspectives and tackling different problems. And everybody's tackling these problems all from a different angle. And I think you start to get like some really interesting network effects where the more decentralized it is, the more the dev companies are out there building and working on different features, the more the tech is going to propel forward because everybody's looking at the problems from a different angle and a different perspective, and then the best ideas kind of rise to the surface and then they kind of get adopted throughout Cosmos. And so I think it's both a bug and a feature.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I kind of see this as like pick your poison, right? If you just want to have an easy language to start off, you will just attract devs who are not that capable of just, building good software at some point. On the other hand, if you have something like Rust, that's a bit harder to learn, right? You have a steep learning curve, so you're just gonna, at some point, scare off a lot of devs that otherwise been around, just as bad devs, which is still some devs, but it's not really the thing that you really want. I'd probably say I'm more leaning towards we'd rather have more capable devs than bad devs, but just less. That's just more personal.
So one interesting trend with Cosmos is we obviously sovereignty, the repeated theme over and over again. But now we have these pockets of devs off on their own. Talk about like the problem of dev isolation in Cosmos. Is that something that you guys see? Because we talk about it as a feature, but also think about the mind share and the lack of collaboration because of all these silos, right? So I don't know, just kind of opening it up as a topic. If you guys have observed those things, if that's something that is a net positive fix, or is that a feature of everyone kind of coming at it from different angles?
I can give you an angle from the stack itself, right? Because I've been working since 2019 on the stack. I was part of the IBC team. We did relayers, and I know throughout cycles in Cosmos in this past 5 years or so, people from an external side, especially from the stack, think, oh, it's all silent. People, they don't talk and things. But what happens is we do have collaborations internally. Like there's a lot of information exchange to get things built on Cosmos. Sometimes you even see, it's funny, sometimes you see people fighting on Twitter, but then on Slack, they just exchanging ideas and solving the problems, right? So there's some misperceptions around that. I think, if you think like what was being accomplished so far from a stack perspective, it's amazing. I'm always thinking like, there's a lot happening that a lot of people don't see it, how it goes behind the scenes. This is from a stack perspective. I know that sometimes from a developer's perspective, it might be quite challenging, but I think little by little, people connect because everything is based on the same stack, and every enhancement, every tweak, and everything on the stack benefits a bunch of people on different chains, right?
I would half agree with this. What's good is at least there's example like Telegram groups or like Discords that you can just exchange information. That's quite good. What I see as a friction is the fact that you just have basically just all different kinds of Cosmos versions, deployed on different chains, right? Like 1.10, I don't know, 0.1 at some start, and 1.5 now, and maybe 2.0, and that in each chain takes its time to just upgrade it to the latest version. Maybe they don't even want to, maybe they don't have the time to do it, and that makes it harder just for devs from different chains to just collaborate. That's what we see as the only friction point right now.
So one thing I've been advocating in our group, we've got somewhere between 10 and 12, 13 devs, something like that right now, is every now and then, we'll have a dev come on for a while, work for us, do some really great work, and then they get an opportunity to go work for another team. And we kind of encourage them to sort of leave the nest and go learn from this other team, take what we've taught you, take it over there, and then we hire somebody else from another, not from another team, but somebody will come in from another organization, and they'll bring in and say, oh, well, on our team, we do it this way. We do things a little bit differently here. We're like, whoa, we never thought about that, because really we're all just kind of learning on the fly. So I think a lot of teams to not necessarily trade, like, hey Carter, I need a running back. You got a wide receiver, not like that, but having those developers move around and take that knowledge back and forth is a really healthy thing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of a feature we were talking about, kind of like the technical versions and adapting, but like the cool thing about it is like just through the map of zones and like all the different zones out there right now, you're crowdsourcing versions, right? Like if a version doesn't get adopted right away or it doesn't get mass adopted by all the different projects, like you know where that version stands. And like And I think it's a bit of a feature, right? Like you see some chains like basically going out and being like, hey, we're going to be on the cutting edge of the SDK, we're going to adopt it right away, and ideally, we're going to be the ones that are testing. And if our chain goes down, who cares? Like we can quickly restart it and fix the bug, and we're going to be first mover. And then you have other teams who are like, hey, no, we're going to be very slow and methodical. We're going to make sure this has been tested in the marketplace for a long time before we upgrade. And so I think it's kind of a feature in some of that sense. So I kind of disagree a little bit with the panelists, but it's fun just hearing different sides to it.
So kind of shift over here. The stack is very large at this point. Is there any particular portion of it that you think is underserved, under-coordinated within, and if so, like why?
All of it?
Let's dig in.
I mean, for example, what I found at least the most confusing from out of all parts was mainly IBC, for example. When it comes to just the documentation-wise, I mean, it has there's no doubt about it, it's absolutely fantastic what it can do, but it's incredibly hard to get a grasp of how to use it properly. And even I think right now, like someone just not even really understanding how to properly use maybe ICA, or just even properly understand how to even sometimes even just how to grasp, does my chain support it? Because it's just such a hard stack to use, but it's incredible, but it's pretty hard to use in practice.
I was just going to say, trace denoms is the one thing we have the hardest thing finding out.
Exactly.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I think the lack of documentation, I think that it goes back a little bit, if you think from the stack perspective, right? It goes back to, I think, the first panel when we're talking about public fundings, right? So this is part of a little bit should be public funding, but sometimes I've seen throughout history in Cosmos, it's like documentation sometimes it's hard because it's like you were mentioning, there are many versions that you need to keep documentation, information. IBC probably it's harder because it's probably one of the most recent part of the stack. Like IBC we didn't back in up to probably 2020, 21. We only had this spec for IBC, which is just a PDF document of 80 pages. Whoever wants to understand IBC had to read the spec. That's it, right? So it's a challenge, I know. It's something that needs to be evolved. But I think one advantage in Cosmos is I see chains now. The interesting part is I once in a while go into documentations of certain chains. Because they are part of the same stack, I see useful information describing things, right? It's not specifically to part of the stack, but I see that you can find information. It's probably not optimal, right? But it's evolving. I think it's still a good friction in Cosmos.
You're welcome.
No, yeah, it's really difficult. On the cutting edge side of things, I think there needs to be more mapping for interchain queries and interchain accounts. I think right at the forefront, that's probably really lacking. And then on the other side of it, I really think about from a new user perspective, we're probably going to expand our ecosystem probably either from Web 2.0 devs or stealing from the Ethereum space. And I can't tell you how many ETH devs where I have to just go through and explain basic concepts, what is IBC in the first place? What is a zone? What is a chain? When I first entered the space, I had a lot of experience on the Ethereum side. It still took me 3 months just to get caught up with all the different modules and terminology. And so, we have a lot to do just on the basic onboarding just to get them to a point where they can even start to understand what is happening. Most probably still don't even understand the concept of the app chains really at the end of the day. And so I think we have a long way to go just teaching these different developers.
We'll kind of get closer rounding out here, but any retrospective in terms of how far we've come? If you can envision when you first entered Cosmos and what the developer ecosystem looked like, what the collaboration and open source ethos look like, how far have we come and what does that look like?
It's still a giant mess. I I mean, there's still giant parts of this ecosystem I don't understand. I've been in it for 5 years. It's just, you have to kind of pick your area you're going to specialize in, and then hope that the ancillary areas that you don't know about don't trip you up at some point. And that's the truth. Like, I mean, the Tendermint layer is so far away from where Andromeda is operating, and I'm just like, I hope that shit makes consensus. I don't know. Like, it's kind of black magic to us. I'm just trusting down low that it's going to keep working. And then you get into the Cosmos SDK layer, we're like, a little closer to there. We're hoping that's going to hold, and then up the stack.
See, you're already a bit behind. It's already comability, so. Exactly. No, but stuff is evolving pretty fast now, and I'm basically, I guess, the youngest from this panel here that has the smallest experience when it comes to cosmosm, and stuff is evolving pretty fast. And even the thing is, like, you just basically learn stuff from, like, you say 1.1, and then like 1.5 came out, or 2.0 came out, and there's like more changes again, for the better, but still changes, and stuff is evolving pretty rapidly.
Youth, though, has a big piece. You don't know what you don't know. And so sometimes it's like it's people who come into the space that are new that don't have the blinders that you get from being in the space for too long. And it's guys like you that go out there and do something like that's never going to work. Holy shit, it actually worked. Like, what is he doing? It's like, I don't know. But don't ever sell yourself short of that. The youth in this, the United States was founded by a bunch of 20 and 30-year-olds that didn't know anything about running a government, right? I mean, that's a testament to, like, kind of just being dumb and just trying it and going for it. That's what this industry is going to take for us to make any kind of strides.
I think the fact that, like I said in the beginning, there are user personas, right? Like you're saying, I don't understand how Comet EFT works at the bottom layer. But in a way, in a sense, if you're a developer, Web2 developers, you trust the operating system, right? You're not going to become a specialist on the operating system internals to ensure that your code runs. You just trust it. If there's a bug on the OS, then there's a bug in the OS, right? But there's certain people that actually go to that level, but they only if they need to. So we work because we work at the bottom, there are people who actually work with us and partner with us because they need to, but not everyone will need to. And there's a trust, and that trust is something that, you gotta trust, but there's always the risk of having a bug or something. Then that's when you might say, oh, I might need to go a little bit down and understand that this is a little bit better. Maybe there's something that I can do to help. And this is happening probably in the past year or so, with all these changes that are coming, like injected UITX, Better Chain, Babylon, all these other guys, like, they need more on the consensus level. They go there. Eventually, if you need, you will go there. But I think it's just a matter of time that more people understand the whole stack in Cosmos. And like I said, it's a stack. Most people will benefit, right? It's the same thing as JavaScript development, like full stack. Like, people know databases, people know middleware, people know front ends. Eventually will improve. It's not going to be perfect. I don't think it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be something more because the framework is always evolving, right? It's always a catch-up game. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would largely agree with that as well. We've seen at Labs the software dev go into Archway. Just like a lot of the engineers on the engineering team we hire, and they come in and they learn like a certain layer of the stack. It could be like, just simple Rust development for Rust development. It could be like, the core SDK. It could be the consensus engine. And then like 3-6 months later, they start to learn a different layer of the stack, and then they start to expand. It's really fun. Like, even the core end SDK engineers are writing, smart contracts, and conversely, smart contract engineers are like diving into the consensus engine. So yeah, it just takes a lot of time and a lot of education. But you just got to kind of pick a spot, specialize, and then expand from there.
So to close, you with all of you with all your experience, let's say a fresh new version of you is getting onboarded into Cosmos. What words of wisdom would you give to them? And that's how we'll close the panel.
Okay, I'll
You're
start.
looking at the camera, you're talking, and you're like, oh, sweet summer youth, this is.
Good luck. No. Look, just be patient. Be patient with learning the stack and development. It's going to take a long time. I mean, most people just entering crypto the first time, I think, take probably a year just to figure out what the heck is going on at a broad level. And like, I'd say expect the same like on the Cosmos side of things. Like, just be patient. You'll learn it all, but just don't feel like you gotta like rush in and learn every single component of it right away. It's okay to take your time picking up all the different pieces.
Yeah, I think one thing is like understand there's always be friction, right? There's it improves the more and more you stay, and like you're saying, you learn, it gets easier, and then you realize the power that the stack can bring you. The aspect of sovereignty, I think it's quite important if you're doing that on that chain. But even if you were like a dApp developer, I think you're going to benefit a lot. Like someone was mentioning about the Rust, the smart contract, Rust, right? This opens up a lot of doors. I think it's just like you're saying, it's just a matter of time.
I would just tell the person, ask themselves very, very seriously, do you like pain?
I would basically give myself two things. First of all, I would make sure that I'm not on a chain that's on the verge of dying. So, for example, I would not build on Juno right now. And secondly, use ChatGPT.
Round of applause for our panelists, everyone. Our final panel will take place in 5 minutes, 5-minute break here, and we'll be right back.